if you don't get it, then get the out of Philly.
Castellanos, high fly ball, way back.
In from this side, who else? That baby Chubb.
Here's McConnell, can he get it off? Yes! Fumbles the football and the Eagles have it.
Jared McKinney making it rain.
Wayne Simmons wins it for Philadelphia.
Long drive, this game is over.
All right, we are back here today with another episode of Philly Talk. Man, what a week of football it was. Probably one of the best weeks of football. You know, I said it, when we were heading into these playoffs, I was super excited for the way these playoffs were going to play out. Who knew it was just going to be a bunch of chaos? Looking at a lot of the games. First off, man, you got to feel bad for Lamar. Though he's not excused from his 2 costly turnovers. You just got to feel for the guy. You got to feel for everyone in that game because everyone was like, man, this is such a tough divisional matchup because whoever loses is going to have to deal with so much from the media, whether it was Lamar or Josh Allen. Whoever loses there would have to deal with just so much from the media. And man, you just feel bad. 2 costly turnovers from Lamar, the costly turnover from Mark Andrews, and then of course dropping the second down, the 2-point conversion. Man, absolute heartbreaker. The Chiefs, man, they just continue their black magic, man. They just continue to find ways to win. It's actually crazy. And then the Commanders upset the Lions. That was pretty crazy. There was a lot of costly turnovers in that one as well. It was absolutely insane for me to tune in to the score. I wasn't watching the actual game, but I opened my fantasy football app, my fantasy app, because I also do fantasy basketball with my friends. But I opened that app to check the score, and I just saw, with the minute left, I was like, wow, the Commanders are actually going to do this. And the crazy thing is that, I had joked a bit with my dad. I was like, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but could you imagine if we had an NFC East championship, between the 2 teams from the NFC East? That would be a pretty crazy NFC championship game. But obviously, the Eagles had to pull through in their game first. But man, it was absolutely crazy watching the game. A ton of offense, a ton of trick plays, obviously, from the Lions, and like I said, a bunch of costly turnovers. Pretty crazy stuff. But before we get into our football, I just have some quick notes to make of the other franchises. Of course, I always want to stay on top of things. The Flyers have been on a roll. They have a game today, but so far they are 4-1 in their last 5 games. They're still struggling a bit defensively, but they've been on quite a roll. Been enjoying a lot of the games watching there. Nothing much for baseball in terms of the Phillies, but the Dodgers just be signing everyone, huh? And at this point, it's getting to the point where I'm just like, this has to be on all the other teams. It's like any of these other teams could have made an offer to Tanner Scott, to Kirby Yates, to any of these guys that the Dodgers have been signing. It's like a lot of them are just being cheap, and it sucks to see for a lot of franchises who are right there, they're on they're literally bordering being full-on contenders, or just a couple pieces away, and their ownerships are just too afraid to spend money, and it's actually disappointing because it's I don't know, it always just is annoying when you have to deal with ownership who doesn't care about the actual sport, all they care about is the money. And all I think about is that one scene from Ted Lasso, because it's I know it's kind of an odd thing to say about sports, but it's the way sports is so ingrained in our society, and the way a lot of us use it, as this sort of escape. It's disappointing to have to see these freaking billionaire owners be so cheap, and it just sucks for the people who, how would you put it, the people who are rooting for these teams, All right, sorry about that. Sorry if there was a visible cut there. Or sorry, not visible, audible cut there. Had to go take care of some things, but we're back. But, I was saying, about the ownership not caring. It just sucks because, these fans, we get so invested. We invest our time, we invest our money, a lot of times spending money to go to these games, to support the team, buying the merch. And, these owners, they just don't care, like, that's why, like, it's not to say that we haven't seen some rough patches. Like, I mean, you see what's going on with the Sixers right now. And I don't know, it's frustrating, to see a lot of owners of a lot of these teams, the fact that they get such support and yet that's how they treat their fan bases. It's very upsetting, That's why I'll always be glad to have Jeffrey Lurie as the owner of the Eagles, because, I have always believed he's one of the best owners, especially because I've always appreciated how open he's been a lot of times, like, he's willing to help invest the money in this team to be better, he's willing to, do whatever it takes. And he's also, like, honest, especially when it comes to, like, the direction of the team, like, a lot of times I think back to, I forget what year it was where, like, he had, like, this, was it 2020? I don't know, but, like, it was, like, he was basically, like, very honest about the fact that, like, this team was going through a transition period and was going to, like, need some time to get back to where they were just a couple seasons ago when we won the Super Bowl, and, like, he was upfront about it. He was upfront that, like, the team needed work and it was going to take some time, and even though us fans were upset with him at the time, he showed that Howie Roseman had his full support, even though it upset many of us because Howie was not doing well at the time. He was like, just, stay with us, trust us. I believe Howie can turn things around with this team. We just have to figure out what our next step is, what direction do we want to go. And, that led to very similar things like the Super Bowl run, where it's like we hire a coach that not too many people are keen on, that are questioning, if it's the right guy. But then, all it took was nailing a couple draft picks, that willingness to trade for players like AJ Brown, so, that's just all I want to say when it comes to the MLB right now. And, all these owners that just are not willing to spend, like the Mariners, it's like they just made the playoffs 2 seasons ago. And what have they done since? It's like they've pretty much done nothing. They had a $15 million budget for this offseason. And I get it. Smaller markets are not going to have as big a budget, and it's always going to be difficult to compete with the bigger markets. But it's like, when you need so many improvements on your team, especially when you saw how badly their offense struggled this past year, and you're giving them a $15 million budget, what players are you going to sign with that type of budget to improve the team? Very frustrating stuff out there in the MLB. And speaking of frustrating, the Sixers, man, it's like, I don't even want to talk about this team. They're on a 6-game losing streak right now, and Embiid just keeps missing time. It's a very frustrating thing where it's like, they don't, funny enough, after all those years, they don't want to commit to a tank, but yet this team isn't really built to compete right now. Like, I know, when all of them are on the court, they're pretty good, but it's like Embiid's missing a lot of time. Paul George, I'm still indifferent on. Obviously, Jared McCain went down. Some of the bench pieces are here or there. Maxi's kind of just having to do it alone. I don't know. Very frustrating with this team, especially when you talk about direction. It's like, this is still that team where it's like, I don't know what to believe, like, the direction for this team is, like, is this really, like, all I'm expecting out of the team, like, if they somehow make the playoffs, it's like first round exit, because it's like, unless they're all completely healthy, and we know when it comes to health, especially with the Sixers, that's such a big if. It's like, if they're healthy, can they make a run? Who knows, but very frustrating team to watch right now. But let's move on to the more positive things. Let's just move on to the main event of this all. The Eagles versus the Rams in the divisional championship game. This was an amazing game because it had everything from defense to offense. The first quarter of this game, I was like, wow, this has got to be one of the most fun, like, teams. This has got to be the most fun I've had watching this team in a while, like, because I think back, it's like, even in 2022, there was a lot of frustration watching this team. There was good games, times where it was fun to watch them, but there was still some frustrating things, especially like on the defensive side. I remember covering that year. Last year, of course, wasn't even any fun at all to watch. It was literally just such a frustrating team to watch. And then, of course, all the years before, it was like, it was a bunch of either retooling or rebuilding, So I was like, man, this has got to be one of the most fun teams I've had the pleasure of watching in a while. And that was just, in the first quarter. And then the next couple of quarters happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, this team. Once again, as it's been like a talking point the entire year, gotta shout out Saquon and the defense for carrying this game. My goodness. Also gotta shout out Dallas Goedert, he was huge in the passing game. Had a bunch of big catches, was a good safety net, and it was real fun from him. Going back to that defense, they got 5 sacks from the defense, a big one from Jalen Carter to set up the final down of this game. Couldn't believe that they left him one-on-one. Obviously, the center just kind of got mismatched and misdirected, but still, the fact that they were doubling him all game and then allowed Jalen Carter to be one-on-one on the second to last play of the game was absolutely insane. The defense also got 2 big turnovers that the offense sadly wasn't able to capitalize on, very much reminiscent of that second Washington game. Funny enough, I was in the restroom when the Kyron Williams fumble happened. I was like, oh man, I just gotta go use the restroom, and I just hear my dad going crazy, and like I had to rush to get out. I was like, my goodness, what the heck happened? But of course, they weren't able to capitalize on it, at least in the way that you wanted them to. Saquon, big time pair of touchdowns to help us out. 2 big old runs. The second one should have sealed the game, but I don't blame the defense because they were pretty gassed on that second to last drive. They were pretty gassed, so I don't really blame them too much for laying up that touchdown, especially when they were doing so well. Like, I think they showed the stat. I think it was like from a point in the third quarter to almost like a point in the fourth quarter. Every drive from the Rams was either like a punt or a turnover. So it was like the fact that they let up that touchdown, I wasn't too angry at them because it was like they were doing their job the entire game and they were just dead tired on that drive. The Rams were really wearing them down. Also got a shout out Kenny Gainwell. That guy, I don't know, he was doing pretty good on the kick and punt returns when he was out there. They were kind of switching between guys. They switched between Isaiah Rodgers, Cooper DeJean, who almost fumbled one, and Kenny G. I thought he was doing pretty well. I was like, man, they should have him do that more often because he got a pretty big return if I remember correctly. But let's get to the big talking point. We talked about those turnovers and we talked about the defense being dead tired. What does a lot of that due to? The offense. The offense from this game, man. Aside from Saquon, who was doing pretty well. Man. I don't know. They were good that first quarter. They were doing really well with things. And then they just struggled to get things going, A lot of that especially can be attributed to the weather, of course, Like, when this game started, everything was like, it was probably cold, but everything's pretty clear. And, they started off passing the ball, which the commentary made note of. They were like, hey, they know Saquon's going to gain a lot of attention from this Rams defense. So why not start the game passing to catch them off guard a bit? But also, I think they were doing that because they were like, hey, it's projected to snow. Let's get the passing out while we can. Let's take full advantage of the passing while we can before this just turns into, was it? Oh man, I forget what it was called on Madden. Man, I don't remember. But it's like, that offensive strategy of just like, before this just turns into just a straight running game, between the two teams. Let's, get as much passing as we can. But like I said, they were good that first quarter, but man, they really struggled. And again, a lot of those struggles could be attributed to the weather, as we saw both teams kind of really struggle with slipping and maintaining control of the ball due to the weather as it got more snowy. Jalen Hurts, big talking point of this game. He's facing a lot of scrutiny, and people are coming to his defense as well as those who are attacking him for this game. The big one I see is that like him and Josh Allen pretty much played a similar game, where it's like they kept the turnovers to a limit. They just passed and got some big passes when they needed to and left it up to their defense and the run game. There was a couple of passes that could have gone his way to really help out his box score stats, like that big catch to AJ that was just couldn't get control of it before he went out of bounds. There was a couple drops. Like I think I saw like at one point AJ had 2 catches on like 6 targets, so he was kind of struggling a bit with getting that ball and especially the drops. Smithy would have had that big catch, but man, took that big old hit from the Rams that resulted in a penalty. But I understand a lot of the defense for Jalen Hurts, especially as a fan of this team. That's our quarterback, so I get it, it's true. He's doing whatever this team needs him to win, He's not having any big old turnovers, which was an issue last season. He's especially playing through injury, like when they twisted up his leg, he still played through. I thought he was going to get taken out, but he still played through. He's getting those passes when you need him to. He's getting those rushes when you need him to. He had that big old 44-yard rush to get that touchdown early in the game. But my issue with Jalen Hurts right now that has been so prevalent, and I get it, because of it plays into the whole no turnovers, trying to limit turnovers. But he is just holding on to the ball too long. Like it seems like every game this season, at least 5 times, my dad and I are screaming at him to just get the ball out. And that plays a lot because of what I said last week, where I was like, you cannot allow the same amount of sacks and pressures that this Vikings team got on, or this Rams team got on the Vikings. You can't allow for that. And to me, I saw some people blaming the offensive line. The offensive line did a great job. It's just hard to block for that long when your QB doesn't want to get the ball out. Like, it's not even just a thing of forcing a pass. Just throw it away if you have to. He took a lot of big losses that knocked us out of field goal range. He took a safety that could have easily impacted this game heavily. Heck, if they don't get that safety, maybe there's not as much pressure on that final drive because, now instead of being just down 6, they're down 8 in total, so it's like maybe there's not that much pressure because it's like if the Rams get a touchdown there, they pretty much win the game because they're up by 1, and we now have to drive down the field to at least get a field goal. And with how Jake's been, that puts a lot of pressure. And, like I said, to me, I'm not even saying you just throw the ball, risk a turnover, in that situation. But it's like, if you aren't going to scramble, if you can't find a scrambling lane, if you're not going to, risk it throwing even just a simple check down, just try and get out to the point where you can throw the ball away and it isn't called intentional grounding. It's beyond frustrating to watch, a lot of these plays happen. Like I said, where we're just like, dude, get the ball out. Like, I get it. He keeps winning. But I just don't know if, we're going to keep winning if stuff like this keeps happening, I don't know if the defense and Saquon can, keep bailing him out when you see stuff like this, Especially because when you look at a lot of other teams in the playoffs so far, it's like a lot of the issues that were prevalent, have come back to bite them in some ways, The Lions, obviously, injuries just finally caught up to them as they really struggled, especially defensively. But also it's like the turnovers were a big thing. The trick plays were really the death of them at times, like they sometimes hit but also sometimes result in turnovers happening. And to me, like, I look at this Eagles team and I'm just like, man, this team is teetering too close to the edge and I just want them to be better. Like, the defense has been outstanding, which is a big surprise for how young they've been, and the offense, to me, it's just like this offense has more potential to reach, and it's like, yeah, you want them to do this stuff more, but it's like, hey, at least they're still winning. Like, maybe you don't have to worry too much about it. Looking forward, though, I seriously hope Q and Hurts are good to go next week. Quinyon Mitchell was out for a majority of this game, but that defense held up. Isaiah Rodgers filled in nicely. So hoping he can be good to go. Hoping Hurts is good to go for next week. Have the NFC East matchup. People are once again underestimating our opponent, and I don't know why, as far as like Eagles fans, because it seems like so many people are rooting for Washington just because I saw someone say like, oh, I don't want the Eagles to win because, I just want a different team in the Super Bowl. And I'm just like, that should apply to like the Chiefs. I don't know how it applies to the Eagles when, just because they made the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and the last time they made it before that was when they won it back in the 2017-18 season. Like, how is that a team that you say is, that like it warrants you to want a different team in the Super Bowl? Like, I don't know, I don't get it. But a lot of people seem to be rooting for Washington. I've also seen people say they don't want the Eagles to win because it's just boring football. Kind of the same reason why I think I even saw someone say they didn't want the Bills for the same reason, because they're like, oh, they're not doing anything flashy, they're not doing anything crazy. I'm just like, I don't know. That just seems like an offensive-minded person, because I'm a guy who enjoys good defense. I'm a guy who enjoys, grinded out football like that. Like watching this, especially obviously it's my team, but it's like watching Saquon on this team. Like I don't know how people find it boring. Saquon just is a master out there. But getting back to the point, I think I see a lot of people underestimating our opponent. Washington is red hot. They have a ton of momentum. They have the mentality right now that the best defense is a good offense, which basically goes into that mentality of, hey, we can't get into a shootout with them, especially with the way, this game played out offensively outside of Saquon Barkley. With the struggles that they've been having with connecting with AJ, with getting, Devontae Smith involved, with, Goddard's been doing pretty well this playoff run, but it's like, with the way this offense is struggling, it's like, I don't know if you really want to get into a shootout with this team, So there is one thing, of course, going back to the very start when the Rams game was happening, like a day, was it the day before or was it the day of? The news broke basically like, hey, it's potentially going to snow against LA. And when that news broke, I remember telling my dad, I feel super confident in the Eagles because if it snows, that turns into a run-heavy game, and there is no team better suited for that than us. With our great offensive line and Saquon Barkley, there is no team better built for a run-heavy game. And, while you can't be reliant on the weather, I do believe that if it does rain or snow again next week, that goes in favor of us, and kind of just shows why home field advantage is so important, because that would easily put the advantage for us because that offensive line, Saquon Barkley, they're just going to dominate the run game. Is it going to look pretty? No, but is Saquon still going to go for a bunch of yards, maybe get a couple of touchdowns? Of course. Right now, this team has a lot of great energy and vibes behind it. I'm really enjoying watching this team, like I said, even though there are some points that I'm just frustrated with. But, I still have full hope in them. That defense is killer right now. I just want our offense to kind of reach our peak and especially build up that momentum if they can get their way to the Super Bowl. I am confident this team can win, and send us to yet another Super Bowl. But again, my message to a lot of Eagles fans is just don't underestimate your opponent. My message to the team, of course, is don't underestimate your opponent, especially when it's the one division rival that has always given us a tough matchup, especially in the past couple of years. They've always just, for some reason, been such a difficult matchup. So it's like you can't underestimate them. I need this team, to just be on top of their game and just keep playing that winning football. I'm very excited for this team. I'm very excited for this next upcoming matchup, man. It's just super exciting football. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you all for tuning for this one. Catch you on the next one.